The best part of my day was 67 seconds long. It was the time it took for the elevator in the Harrison building to descend 23 floors to the lobby. Most days, it was a solitary journey, a quiet hum in a polished steel box. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, if I timed it just right, he was there. Marcus, the evening security guard. He wouldn't ride with me, not usually. He would be at his post, a solid, grounding presence in the cavernous marble lobby, and he would watch the elevator doors slide open. Sometimes he'd nod. My heart would perform a frantic, clumsy pirouette in my chest, and I would nod back, trying to look like a normal person and not someone whose entire emotional state for the next 12 hours hinged on this minuscule, almost non-existent interaction. My life was a landscape of muted grays. I was a data analyst for a faceless corporation, a job that required me to translate the chaos of human behavior into neat, predictable columns and charts. I was good at it because my own life was a predictable chart. Wake up, commute, work, commute, eat, sleep. The only variable, the only splash of unpredictable color, was Marcus. He was built like he was carved from something permanent, with broad shoulders that strained the seams of his crisp, navy blue uniform and a jawline that could have been used to measure right angles. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it was a small, private thing that didn't always reach his eyes, making the rare occasions it did feel like a personal victory. For 6 months, this was our routine. My silent observation from the descending elevator, his stoic presence in the lobby. I knew the way he stood, with his weight settled on one leg. I knew the rhythm of his breathing when I was close enough to hear it. I knew the scent of his cologne, a clean, sharp fragrance like gin and cedar that clung to the air near his desk. I knew these things in the way a scholar knows a dead language, intimately, but with no hope of ever speaking it. That Tuesday was different. A quarterly report had imploded, and my boss, a man whose resting face was a shade of panicked mauve, had declared it an all-hands-on-deck emergency. Sunset bled across the skyline, staining the glass walls of our office in shades of orange and violet. One by one, my colleagues packed up, their sympathetic glances feeling more like pity. "See you tomorrow, Leo," they'd say, and I'd murmur a reply without looking up from my screen. Soon, the floor fell silent, the only sound the frantic clicking of my own keyboard and the low hum of the building's climate control. By the time I finally leaned back, my spine crackling in protest, it was well past 9. The office was a ghost ship, a collection of dark screens and empty chairs. I was the last soul on the 23rd floor. A wave of profound loneliness washed over me, so sharp and sudden it was almost dizzying. I gathered my things, my movements slow and heavy with exhaustion, and walked toward the elevators. And there he was, not at his desk in the lobby, but right here, standing in the elevator vestibule on my floor. My heart did its familiar, stupid lurch. He was holding a large thermos, and for a second, my analyst brain tried to compute the variables. Why was he here? Was this part of his rounds? I'd never seen him up here before. He turned as I approached, his expression unreadable in the dim lighting. "Working late," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was a low rumble, deeper than I'd imagined, and it seemed to vibrate in the quiet space between us. "Yeah," I managed, my own voice sounding thin and reedy. "Big report." He gave a short, single nod, the kind I knew so well. But this was different. We were alone, 23 floors above the sleeping city. The air was thick with unspoken things. He pressed the call button, and the light bloomed a soft gold. The doors slid open with a quiet sigh. He gestured for me to go first. I stepped inside, hyper-aware of him following behind me. The space, usually just a box, suddenly felt incredibly small, charged with his presence. The doors closed, sealing us in. I could smell his cologne, that familiar scent of cedar, but now it was warmer, mixed with the faint, clean scent of starch from his uniform. He didn't press the lobby button. He just stood there, near the control panel, watching me. My reflection in the mirrored steel walls was a stranger, a pale, slightly disheveled man with wide, anxious eyes. Beside him, Marcus was a mountain. Calm, solid. He looked directly at my reflection, his gaze steady. I felt pinned by it, exposed. My entire internal world, this secret garden of yearning I had so carefully cultivated around him, felt like it was about to be laid bare under that unwavering stare. "You're Leo, right?" he asked. He knew my name. Of course, he knew my name. He was security. He probably had a list of every employee in the building. Still, hearing it from his lips sent a jolt through me. Yes, I said, my throat suddenly dry. And you're Marcus, a flicker of something, surprise? Amusement? Crossed his face. You know my name, it's on your name tag, I said quickly, a pathetic attempt to sound casual. It was a lie. His name tag was often flipped around or obscured by the strap of his radio. I knew his name because I'd overheard someone say it once, months ago, and I had held on to it like a precious stone. He didn't call me on the lie. He just continued to watch me for a beat longer before turning to press the button for the lobby. The elevator began its descent, a smooth, familiar hum. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I stared at the numbers as they lit up, counting down our time together. 22, 21, 20. I found myself wishing the ride would last forever. Then, between the 15th and 14th floors, the elevator gave a violent shudder. A horrible, grinding noise echoed through the car, and we lurched to a sudden, sickening stop. The main lights flickered once, twice, and then died. We were plunged into absolute darkness. A strangled gasp escaped my lips before I could stop it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Claustrophobia, cold and immediate, began to prickle at the edges of my consciousness. Easy, Marcus's voice cut through the blackness, calm and steady. A moment later, a dim, orange light flickered on. The emergency lighting. It cast long, distorted shadows, turning the small space into a strange, intimate cavern. His face was half in shadow, his features stark and serious. Just a power dip, probably. Happens sometimes. I was breathing too fast, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Are we stuck? Looks like it, he said, his tone infuriatingly calm. He moved to the control panel and pressed the emergency call button. A tinny, static-filled voice answered. Yeah, maintenance. This is Marcus in car 3. We're stuck. Looks like we're between 14 and 15-inch. He paused, listening. Just me and a tenant. All right. Keep me posted. He hung up and turned back to me. The orange light made his eyes look like dark, polished stones. They're on it, he said. Might be a little while. Trapped in a tiny metal box with the one person who could unravel me with a single glance. My mind raced. This was a nightmare. This was a fantasy. This was happening. I leaned against the cool metal wall, trying to get my breathing under control. You okay? He asked, his voice softer now. It lacked the professional edge from before. It was just him. I don't love small spaces, I admitted, feeling childish. He nodded slowly. Just try to breathe. It's safe. We're not going anywhere, he said it as a reassurance, but the words hung in the air with a double meaning. We weren't going anywhere. Just us. My heart picked up its pace for an entirely different reason. He took off his heavy-duty jacket, the one with the security patch on the shoulder, and folded it neatly, placing it on the floor. He was left in a simple, short-sleeved navy shirt that hugged the muscles in his arms and chest. He sat down on the floor, leaning his back against the wall opposite me, stretching his long legs out. He looked completely at ease, as if getting stuck in an elevator was a minor inconvenience, like a red light. I, on the other hand, remained standing, rigid with a cocktail of anxiety and a strange, thrilling anticipation. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. The only sounds were the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the emergency light and our own breathing. I could hear his, slow and even. Mine was still a little too quick. I watched him. I could not watch him. The low light was forgiving, allowing me to stare more openly than I ever dared through the reflective doors. I studied the line of his throat, the way his hands rested on his knees. One of his knuckles was bruised, a faint purple mark on an otherwise perfect hand. I wondered how he'd gotten it. He must have felt my gaze, because he looked up and met my eyes directly. I didn't look away this time. I couldn't. It felt like a challenge, a dare. So, Leo the data analyst, he said, breaking the silence. What kind of data do you analyze? The question was so mundane, so normal, that it was jarring. Consumer trends, I said. Market research. It's not very exciting, you like it? I thought about my gray cubicle, the endless spreadsheets, the feeling of being a small, insignificant cog in a massive machine. It's a job, I said, which was the most honest answer I could give. He considered this for a moment. I get that, he said. This is just a job, too. Mostly, what's the mostly? I asked, my curiosity getting the better of my anxiety. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Mostly it's just watching cameras and walking empty hallways. But sometimes, you meet interesting people. His eyes held mine, and the implication was so clear, so direct, that the air crackled. He thought I was interesting. My mouth went dry. I am not interesting. I am spreadsheets and takeout for one, and a crush on a man who doesn't know I exist. Or who didn't know I existed. Now he does. And we are trapped together. My legs started to feel shaky, so I slid down the wall until I was sitting, mirroring him. Our knees were only a few feet apart. The intimacy of the space was pressing in on me, a physical weight. I could feel the warmth radiating from him. You're always the last one to leave on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he stated, his voice a low murmur. My blood ran cold, then hot. He'd noticed. He had noticed my schedule. It wasn't just me observing him. He had been observing me, too. The realization sent a dizzying, terrifying wave of hope through me. I have a recurring late meeting. I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My pathetic little routine was built around him, and he knew it. He had to know. He let out a soft chuckle. It was a beautiful sound, low and rich. Sure you do, he said, and the way he said it told me he saw right through me. He wasn't mocking me. It was something else. Something knowing. He shifted, leaning forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. The movement brought him closer. You know, for a guy who doesn't like small spaces, you seem to be handling this pretty well. You said to breathe, I whispered. That's all you gotta do, he replied, his voice dropping even lower. It was hypnotic. Just breathe. He pushed himself to his feet in one fluid motion and walked over to the control panel. He pressed the door open button a few times. It made no sound, did nothing. He sighed, a theatrical sound of frustration that I knew was fake. He wasn't frustrated. He was something else entirely. He was in control. He turned away from the panel and leaned his back against it, crossing his arms over his powerful chest. He surveyed the small space, his gaze landing on me, still sitting on the floor. Then he slowly, deliberately, pushed himself away from the panel and leaned one shoulder against the stainless steel handrail that ran along the wall. He looked down at me, his expression softening in the dim, orange glow. No rush, he said. The two words landed in the silent car like stones in a still pond. They weren't about the elevator. They weren't about the maintenance crew. They were about this. Us. This suspended moment in time. He was giving me permission. He was giving me an opening. My heart is a traitor. It pounds against my ribs, a desperate Morse code. Now or never. Now or never. The air is thick, syrupy. I can taste the ozone from the emergency light. My carefully constructed world of silent observation and safe distances has been shattered. We are here, in this box, and the space between us is shrinking with every breath. I look at him, really look at him. The low light carves shadows under his cheekbones, catches the slight curve of his lips. He is waiting. For what? For me to run? To hide? To pretend I don't understand the meaning behind his words? For 6 months, I have been a ghost, watching him from a distance. But he sees me. He has been seeing me all along. I have to say something. If I don't say it now, in this box suspended in time, I never will. The fear of rejection is a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but the fear of letting this moment slip away is infinitely worse. I get to my feet, my legs unsteady. I feel like a newborn fawn, all wobbly knees and terrified hope. I stand before him, close enough to feel the heat coming off his body, close enough to see the faint flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I'm not in a rush, I say, my voice a broken whisper. His eyes search mine, looking for something. He must find it, because the last bit of professional distance in his expression melts away, replaced by a raw, undisguised vulnerability that mirrors my own. Good, he breathes. He uncrosses his arms. Slowly, as if not to spook a wild animal, he lifts a hand. My breath catches in my throat. His fingers, warm and slightly calloused, brush against my jaw, then settle gently on the side of my neck. His thumb strokes the sensitive skin just below my ear. The touch is electric, a supernova of sensation that radiates through my entire body. I close my eyes, leaning into his hand, a silent surrender. This is real. This is happening. He takes a small step forward, closing the final inches between us. I can feel the solid wall of his chest against mine. His other hand comes up to cup the other side of my face, holding me as if I were something precious. He tilts my head up slightly. I open my eyes. He is all I can see. He doesn't rush. He just looks at me, his gaze intense and questioning. He is giving me one last chance to back away. I don't. I can't. I lift my own trembling hand and place it over his heart. I can feel its steady, powerful beat beneath my palm. It's just as calm as he is. It gives me courage. He dips his head, and then his lips are on mine. The kiss is not what I expected. I had fantasized about this moment, of course, in 1,000 different ways. In my daydreams, it was always desperate, hungry, a collision of pent-up feelings. But this is not that. This is slow. It's gentle. It's a question and an answer all at once. His lips are soft, warm, and they move against mine with a devastating patience. It's a kiss of discovery, a quiet exploration in the dark. It tastes of coffee and cedar and the dizzying, terrifying relief of reciprocation. I melt against him, my hands sliding up his chest to grip his shoulders. He pulls me closer, one hand sliding from my face down to the small of my back, holding me firmly against him. The kiss deepens, becoming more confident, more certain. All the anxiety, the loneliness, the months of silent yearning, it all dissolves in this one, perfect moment. I am no longer an observer. I am here. I am part of this. And then, just as I feel like I might come apart at the seams, the elevator gives a tremendous lurch. The main lights flicker on, buzzing loudly, flooding the car with a harsh, sterile white light. A mechanical whirring starts up, and we begin to descend. We spring apart as if electrocuted. I stumble back against the far wall, my lips tingling, my entire body buzzing. Marcus straightens up, running a hand over his face. He looks as dazed as I feel. The spell is broken. The intimate, orange-lit cavern is once again a cold, sterile elevator car. He won't look at me. He stares at the floor, his jaw tight. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through the warm haze of the kiss. He regrets it. Oh God, he regrets it. I've made a terrible mistake. I've ruined everything. The 67 seconds of my day I used to cherish are now gone forever, replaced by this horrible, suffocating awkwardness. The rest of the ride down to the lobby, maybe 10 seconds, maybe a lifetime, is spent in absolute, deafening silence. My mind is screaming. Say something. Fix this. Apologize. But my throat is closed, my tongue a leaden weight in my mouth. The elevator dings softly as it arrives at the ground floor. The doors slide open to reveal the empty, brightly lit lobby. Freedom. Escape. I expect him to bolt, to stride back to his desk and immerse himself in his duties, to put as much physical and emotional distance between us as possible. I expect to scurry out into the night, my heart in pieces, my face burning with shame. But Marcus doesn't move. He waits for me to step out first. I do, my legs feeling like they belong to someone else. I walk toward the massive glass doors, not daring to look back. I can feel his presence behind me, a heavy weight on my shoulders. Just as I reach for the handle of the door, his voice stops me. Leo. I freeze, my hand hovering over the cold steel. I turn around slowly. He has stopped a few feet away. His face is a mask of neutrality, but his eyes are full of a turmoil that mirrors my own. I get off in an hour, he says, his voice quiet but steady. Each word is carefully placed. Wait for me. The question hangs in the marbled expanse of the lobby. It's a lifeline, a fragile bridge across the chasm of doubt that had just opened between us. It's a confirmation. It was real. He doesn't regret it. He wants more. Hope, fierce and impossibly bright, surges through me. Okay, I breathe. The word is barely audible, but he hears it. A visible wave of relief washes over his features. He gives me another one of his small, private smiles, but this one is different. This one reaches his eyes, and it makes them shine. There's a coffee shop across the street, he says. It's open late. I'll be there, I promise. He nods, that familiar, stoic gesture, but it means something entirely new now. He turns and walks back toward his security desk, his stride purposeful. I watch him go, my heart doing a slow, graceful waltz in my chest. The next hour was the longest of my life. I sat in a worn armchair at the Daily Grind, a generic coffee shop that smelled of burnt espresso and sugar. I ordered a tea I didn't drink, its steam rising in a lazy curl toward the ceiling. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind, replaying every second of what happened in the elevator. The shuddering stop, the orange light, the low timbre of his voice. No rush, the feeling of his thumb on my neck. The impossible softness of his lips. With every minute that ticked by on the large clock behind the counter, my old friend, doubt, began to creep back in. He wouldn't show. He would change his mind. It was a mistake, a moment of strange intimacy born of a weird situation. He would finish his shift, walk out the back door, and I'd never see him again, except in those 67-second rides that would now be unbearable. My life would revert to its predictable chart, but now it would be tainted with the memory of what I almost had. I was an expert at being alone, but the thought of returning to it after that kiss felt like a physical pain. I was halfway to convincing myself to leave, to spare myself the humiliation of being stood up when I saw him. He pushed through the glass doors of the Harrison building, and my breath caught in my chest. He was out of his uniform. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and a pair of dark, well-worn jeans. Without the formal structure of the uniform, he looked younger, softer, more approachable. He looked like just a man. My man. The thought was so audacious it made me dizzy. He looked both ways before crossing the street, his gaze scanning the coffee shop windows. His eyes found mine, and he didn't even break his stride. He walked straight across the street and into the shop, the little bell above the door announcing his arrival. He came right to my table and slid into the chair opposite me without a word. He looked at my untouched cup of tea, then back at me. "You waited," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, but his voice was thick with relief. "You told me to," I replied, a smile playing on my lips. I couldn't seem to stop smiling. "I'm glad you listened," he said, and his own smile finally broke free, wide and genuine. It transformed his entire face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. He was beautiful. We didn't talk about the elevator. We didn't talk about the kiss. Not yet. Instead, he asked me about my day, and I asked him about his. We talked about banal things, the terrible coffee, the weird weather, the city at night. It was easy. It was comfortable. All the awkwardness from the lobby had evaporated, leaving behind a quiet, happy intimacy. This was real. After a while, he pushed his chair back. "Come on," he said. "I hate this place. Let's walk." We left the coffee shop and wandered through the quiet downtown streets. The city, usually a roaring beast, was subdued, sleeping. Our footsteps echoed softly on the pavement. We walked side by side, a comfortable distance between us. But I was acutely aware of the space, of the way his hand swung close to mine with every step. I wanted to close that gap, to take his hand, but I was afraid of moving too fast, of breaking the spell. As if he could read my mind, as we waited to cross an empty street, Marcus reached over and took my hand. He didn't just grab it. He slowly, deliberately, laced his fingers through mine. His palm was warm and strong against my own. The simple, profound rightness of it stole my breath. Holding his hand, out here under the streetlights, felt more intimate, more real, than the desperate kiss in the dark. It was a public declaration, even if the only audience was the sleeping city. It was a choice. We found a small, deserted park, a tiny patch of green tucked between towering glass buildings. We sat on a cold metal bench, our hands still intertwined, resting on his knee. We sat in a comfortable silence, just watching the traffic lights change from red to green on a street with no cars. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," he said softly, breaking the silence. "What?" I asked, though I knew. "Kiss you," he said, turning to look at me. "Talk to you. Hold your hand." He squeezed my fingers. "I used to watch you on the cameras, rushing to the elevator on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I knew you were timing it. I started timing it, too." My heart swelled. All this time, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was living in a one-sided story. But he had been writing his own chapter all along. "The elevator," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Did you?" He grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I can't take credit for the power failure. But I might have hit the maintenance stop for a few extra minutes before I called it in." I stared at him, my mouth agape, before a laugh bubbled up out of me. A real, genuine laugh. He had stuck the elevator. He had engineered our moment. The thought was so incredibly, wonderfully absurd that I couldn't help but laugh. He laughed with me, a deep, warm sound that wrapped around me like a blanket. When our laughter subsided, A peaceful quiet settled over us again. I leaned my head on his shoulder, a gesture that felt as natural as breathing. He rested his cheek against the top of my head. The gray landscape of my life was suddenly, irrevocably, flooded with color. All the spreadsheets, the lonely nights, the quiet desperation, it all felt a million miles away. I thought about my old life, my life of observation. I had been so content to watch from the sidelines, to live in the safe, predictable world of my own creation. I had been afraid to step into the arena, to risk the pain of rejection for the possibility of connection. But Marcus, with his steady gaze and his quiet confidence, had walked right into my sterile world, stopped the elevator, and refused to let me hide any longer. He had leaned against that rail and given me the greatest gift anyone ever had: time. He'd looked at me, really seen me, and said, "No rush." He had given me the space to be brave. I lifted my head and looked at him. His smile was gone, replaced by an expression of such tender affection that it made my chest ache. I leaned in and kissed him, right there on that bench in the middle of the sleeping city. It was a soft, grateful kiss, a kiss that held the promise of 1,000 more to come. It was the beginning. He pulled back just enough to press his forehead against mine. I closed my eyes, memorizing the feeling of his skin against mine, the scent of cedar in the night air, the solid weight of his hand holding mine. I was no longer a lonely analyst watching the world from a descending box. I was here. I was found. I felt like I'd finally come home.